Welcome back to Next Shift with Rick Wagen. Suzuki does not suck. This is the show after the Montreal Canadiens weekend between the games between the Vancouver Canucks and the Colorado Avalanche. It was back-to-back games on the road. The Montreal Canadiens unfortunately lost the game 4-2 in Chicago, jumped on a plane, got over to Denver the next day, and took on the former Stanley Cup champions 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, I guess. They basically took them on a 2-1 win in the shootout. They were able to win the game 2-1, and it was basically a come from behind win with a 1-0 deficit going into the third period, where Cole Caufield scored a beautiful goal assisted by Suzuki and Hutson with a great back-checking effort by Evans to tie the score. And then over in the shootout, overtime, nothing panned out. And then in the shootout, Dobes was solid again and shut down their two shooters of Drouin and Rantanen. And the Canadiens got goals from Caufield and Doc to end the game. So it was a great win and a big win for the Montreal Canadiens. They head back home on Monday to play the Vancouver Canucks, which is a big game for the Montreal Canadiens. The Canucks are, I believe, without Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, and Thatcher Demko. Yeah, so it should be a big game for the Canadiens, as their calendar does not get any easier in January. They play that game, and then they have an away game in Washington with a back-to-back against Dallas. Then they play Utah the following week on Tuesday, and in Dallas on Thursday. Then they play the Leafs at home on Saturday, and that's a back-to-back against the Rangers. And we'll stop there because it doesn't get much easier, although Tampa, Detroit, and New Jersey are what remain. So they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games left in the month of January. They're already 1-1. If they could go 6-4 in that, it would be amazing. If they go 500, I think that would be solid, considering the competitors that they're playing against. So all in all, I think the Montreal Canadiens have really proven that they are, have turned the corner since I think two major things have happened, in my opinion. Patrick Laine, who has basically joined the squad. He did miss the last couple of games because of flu-like symptoms or flu. And the Montreal Canadiens were also missing David Savard for some of those games as well, with an upper body injury. And they also got Alex Carrier over from that pick from a trade between Nashville and Montreal with Barron, and he's just fit in very nicely with Gouli, who are both playing some solid defensive hockey. It seems like the lines are kind of fitting in right now, and obviously with these sicknesses and injuries, there's a bit of rotation with Struble jumping in and Pizzetta playing a little bit. It's kind of tricky this weekend, but I think once Laine gets back, and if Savard gets back sooner or later, it could be interesting. So all in all, the Montreal Canadiens are, what are they now? They're 18-3, so they're 500 and 39 games into the season. They are one of the top point-producing teams in the last month or so, and their team is definitely looking solid. Cole Caufield already has 21 goals, which is a great start to the season. And Suzuki is close to, if not at, I think he's 1 point behind a point per game at 38 points with 11 goals and 27 assists. And Hutson has 27 points with 2 goals and 25 assists. So all in all, can't say enough about these Montreal Canadiens kind of turning the corner in the last 3 to 4 weeks. And it looks like they're going to make a push, and they're only 1 or 2 points behind Pittsburgh now, with a couple of games in hand for the Wildcard spot. And there's a few teams ahead of them. They have Ottawa, Columbus, Philadelphia is tied with them. Detroit's just a point behind. So it could be interesting to see how it goes. So all in all, my take has been, can they make it to the mix? Can they get to 85 to 86 points? They're going to need to get closer to 90, I think, to make the playoffs, which, would be an amazing accomplishment, considering they were fifth to last year, I believe, and third to last the year before. So all in all, good for the Montreal Canadiens, and it's definitely a fun team to watch. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry I didn't introduce you, Cole. This is my son, Cole. He's been on the show before a couple months ago. He's visiting from Vancouver, where he goes to school. And Cole, I would love your take on some of the things I said, what you're thinking about from the Montreal Canadiens, and any questions you have for me, and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I want to start off with is, I think, well, we did have a conversation on the show maybe a week or so ago. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the audio working. The audio was a little messed up, so it wasn't posted. But in that conversation, we did talk a bit about like what would it take for the Montreal Canadiens to actually make a playoff push. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I did mention was some goaltending, right? And I said if you call up somebody like Dobes or something along those lines, and he plays good, then that really kind of adds a new dynamic to the team, because I feel like a lot of their games lost. Primo was just not playing with a lot of confidence and things like that. So, obviously with Montembeault, he's a good goalie, but you don't want him to play every single game. He's not like Carey Price level, right? You can't play every single game. Mm-hmm. So to have somebody like like Dobes to come in. And it's only been 2 games, but this is kind of the impact that a player like that can have. And I expect that if he could get to a consistent level of playing at this level, where maybe not at the same level, because he's obviously ridiculous. If he is a goalie playing at that level for the entire year, then you're not going to lose any games. But having a goalie who plays consistently and at an NHL level, even if it's like in maybe average starter level, kind of tier, I would say, really would benefit the team, especially since over, I think, the past couple of weeks they've improved a lot defensively, like what you said with Alexandre Carrier and his impact defensively. And I feel like also a lot of the players are getting more comfortable. Like, I think Hutson. I think Hudson's gotten more comfortable. He was always pretty good defensively, but I feel like he's gotten a little more comfortable defensively.
Right.
And it shows in his numbers. I mean, he has had a much better plus minus over like the last 2 weeks, I think, compared to like the rest of the year.
Yep, for sure.
And I think, he's always been a good defensive player, but him being more comfortable with that as a young player is really important. So that's kind of one player that I mean, obviously, Dobes to me was a really exciting player to watch, and I've watched him before.
Yeah, you mentioned him in the past. You've been following him for 3 or 4 years or more. So
yeah,
he's
a fun player. He's a fun goalie to watch. So
yeah, it's
fun to have that kind of exciting talent. I mean, as a player, just he's a joy to watch in that way. Like when he plays good, he's full of confidence. I think that's kind of the type of goalie they kind of needed.
Agreed.
And hopefully that lasts through the rest of the year, and I think that gives them the best chance to actually have a shot at actually getting a playoff spot. And even if they don't get a playoff spot, I think this is a lot better for their development. Being in the competition, playing meaningful hockey games. I think me and my dad talked about it a bit, but Martin St. Louis, I thought especially the Avalanche game, he really coached it differently than he has in the past.
Yep.
Where he kind of coached it more like I'm not saying he's like they're tanking or anything, but he coached in a way that wasn't prioritizing young players and more like prioritizing who's the best player, and he did really well that game. I think he coached. I mean, you said he coached very well that game, and I mean we think he is a good coach, but that's kind of a different side of him that we haven't really seen as much, and I think that's actually something that's really underlooked. I don't know what your take is on that. Yeah,
no, listen, let's touch on all the things you just brought up, because I think it's important to note. I mean, you started off with Dobes, right? And I think the combination of 2 things. One, obviously, like you said, I don't think any goalie, unless he becomes the best goalie of all time, is going to have the numbers he's had in the first 2 games for his entire career. But like you said, there's 2 variables here. Montembeault is a good goalie. He's maybe even an above-average goalie, but playing every game, he's not the type of player that should be like a Hellenbuck playing 65, 70 games a year. And that's what he was going to be forced to do if you had a Primo as a backup. So with Dobes there, he can lighten the load on Montembeault. He can potentially play better because he'll have less of a load. he'll have competition, and that's the other variable. And you have a goalie that can come in and actually win games and maybe be equal to him, right? So that's a huge benefit. I agree. The other thing that you mentioned is true. I mean, Lane Hutson, although he's continuing to gain points, he has 27 points. He was, I believe, minus 16 or minus 18 just a couple of weeks ago. Now he's minus 8. So he's I'm not a big plus minus stat guy, but he's obviously improved on the defensive side of the puck, and that's helping the Canadiens. But I think it's all their defense that have improved because of Carrier, right?
I think it just shows that he's not bad defensively. It was just like the team wasn't good defensively, but they're improving, and he's a part of that, right? He's not like some sort of outlier or anything. Like he's like pretty solid himself.
Right. And then you called out Martin St. Louis. And listen, I've been the biggest proponent of Martin St. Louis. I watch all of his interviews. I love the way he communicates to the media, to the team, from what we can understand. He's been in development mode for most of his career in terms of developing talent. I think what we saw is two things happen in the last couple of months. In the beginning of the year, they were getting blown out 4 or 5 times in October, 2 or 3 times in November, and then they've gotten better in December. The difference, in my opinion, is that the Montreal Canadiens have understood and figured out their defensive system, and their defensive hybrid man-on-man system has bled into the neutral zone as well, and all 4 lines have figured it out. Except for maybe the second line. The second line is still having some trouble. Doc and Newhook and Lane or whoever has been playing with them continue to be the one line that has given up some goals. But they continue to do. They're playing a solid, mature game once they get their leads. Or even in the Avalanche game when they were down by 1. They didn't open it up and try to make mistakes, and they stayed in a mature defensive game and waited for their chance, and they got their chance when Caufield scored. Back to your comment, and I'll just make it specific. You mentioned this in our conversations. He figured out, okay, Slafkovsky isn't having his greatest game. He didn't have his greatest weekend. Don't know if he's injured. Don't know if he's not feeling well. Don't know if he just didn't show up. But he didn't look good out there. He pulled Evans onto the first line, and that led to that goal with a great back check. And I think it was a brilliant move. But more importantly, he shortened his bench. He was down to 3 lines. He had, Doc and Newhook continued to play, and he kind of rotated a player in there. He had Dvorak and Anderson and Galley playing, and then he had Evans playing with Suzuki and Caufield. And so that player was either Armia or sometimes it was Pizzetta, and sometimes it was Heineman, but they didn't play a lot. The last 8 minutes, Heineman didn't play. He was playing a decent game, but to your point, I think he was prioritizing winning versus developing for that period, and that's okay. We see that. If you're following the Montreal Canadiens prospects, Demidov in SKA, right, in the KHL, they're a team that's trying to win a championship in the KHL, and their coach is playing that style of game where he shortens the bench and he's not playing the young players as much, and that's sometimes what you have to do. And it's hopefully a learning situation with those players, a motivating factor where they'll play better hockey so they earn their time in the third period and they feel like they have to. And it was fun to watch the Montreal Canadiens win a game like that, where they were down in the third period. They shortened their bench. Martin St. Louis did the best he could to match lines and figure out what's going on. And it's obviously hard to do on the road. And they did this on a back-to-back in high altitude in Denver. And credit to Dobes, who played I think he played a better game against the Colorado Avalanche than he did against Florida, even though he didn't get the shutout, because there was many danger chances with Rantanen and McKinnon and some high power. There's a breakaway by Lehkonen. There was a bunch of opportunities that he shut down, and he looked great in the shootout as well. So, listen, I agree with everything you're saying. Anything else top of mind, or?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of build on your points, I think it was definitely, in my opinion, kind of like a playoff game atmosphere. In the sense that the actual intensity I think was heightened, and when you shorten the bench and make those decisions, I thought it was important in a sense that if you think about it, like Martin St. Louis isn't only just developing players, like he's developing himself as a coach because he's never really coached that level, right? Yeah. So to put him in a position where you actually have to, coach a game where you're trying to, I mean, they always try to win, right? But in kind of an environment against a really good team, and coach in a way that's, very winning focused and not based on like experience or anything.
Yep.
I thought he did a great job. So I think that was very promising. And also your point about competition, I think for me it's kind of exciting because with Montembeault, I think he actually was succeeding a lot with competition, especially last year. I think when they had the 3 goalie tandem, and he's shown above like the rest of the goalies clearly. I think he's a goalie that does well in competition. So I think more so, I think it not only will be positive, obviously, to have Dobes, but I think people underlooking it will say like, Montembeault, and I see people say it like trade. I mean, this is like ridiculous, but like trade Montembeault and stuff like that. But like, I think people have to look at it in a sense that it's not about one player being better than another. It helps both of them. It's good to have 2 good goalies. It's even better to have 2 good goalies that are making each other even better, especially young goalies, right? So I think it's it's way better than I expected. I mean, I wish we recorded the the show successfully to show that I actually said that. There's not really proof of it. I mean, you're the only one who knew that I said something related to that. But
no, you're right.
Yeah, like I think that's the recipe. The rest of the team is just playing better, and I think over time that kind of occurs, especially with like a younger team. I think you figure it out over the season, and yeah, I mean it's really exciting, and I want to see what they do in the trade deadline and see what changes they try to make or if there are any, and what direction they kind of go into. Obviously I think January is super important, right?
Yeah.
If they win a lot, then like what do you do? If they lose a lot, I mean it's kind of, I think the more boring answer is if they don't get to that level where they're competing as much, or it's more out of the picture. But if they're in the picture, right, like what do you do? It's kind of a conflicting statement because like, do you want to trade players? That's obviously risky, especially when you're at a stage where you're actually competing for a playoff spot. There's a couple players that could be traded potentially, and I don't know. I guess I could ask you that if that's a good question. But like, like what players do you think have the highest chance of being traded, and do you think it's a good do you think would be a good thing, or like I don't know?
I find it an interesting situation for the Montreal Canadiens. First of all, if they're not in the mix and they start falling off, I will expect it'll be probably because of an injury or or 2, or if they have the lineup they have right now and the way they're playing and they just fall off, that'll be pretty disappointing, to be honest. So but if it happens, I think there's a lot of people that could get traded, right? You could trade Dvorak, Armia, Savard, and then Evans could be a decision, what they want to do with that. And they could even trade, a Matheson or an Anderson or somebody that they think a team might think could help them win in the playoffs, considering those guys only have a couple more years on their contracts. And, that might be a way to kind of, figure out the team moving forward. I don't think that's going to happen, right? I think the Montreal Canadiens are going to stay in the mix a little bit. Like they're not going to fall off the complete shelf here. And so from that perspective, I think it's going to be, what can you get for these players? And I don't think the Canadiens are just going to trade a player to get rid of them for a 3rd or 4th round pick. Yeah. The Montreal Canadiens have a ton of assets, and the odds of a 3rd or 4th round pick making it or providing value in a trade, I don't see it. I mean, they could make a move that would surprise me again, like a Matheson or an Anderson or Gallagher or something like that. That is somebody that's not one of those guys that's UFA for somebody they think could be a longer term solution for the Montreal Canadiens, like a right defenseman or a scoring winger or something like that, or center if they have enough assets with some prospects. I think the only one, to be honest, that might have a chance to get traded is Savard, because Savard, 2 reasons. One, the defense market is kind of thin. Again, he's not going to get re-signed next year, so you're losing him. So is the value of him? They're going to try playing Struble more, I think, and they're going to say, is the value of Savard and Struble that much different for the remainder of the year should they make the playoffs. If it is, they keep Savard. If it isn't, they can get a second-round pick for him. It's better than nothing, I think. And I think next year in the summer they're going to look for another veteran right defenseman that to fit in, or hope Mayu can step in. But again, I think they still need 2 more right defensemen, right? Because they have Hutson, they have Gooley now, who's playing great hockey, and Arbor Jackey's really looked really good, and Struble is okay. So you have 4 left-handed defensemen, and we're not talking about Engstrom in the minors that can play hockey, and then you have Matheson. So there's a lot of left-handed shots there, and there's only 3 spots for 5 people. That's next year. So I think they're probably going to keep Armia because Armia was a guy that you couldn't trade for anything before. He is building a lot of value now. He's going to do the 4 Nations tournament, so maybe he'll bring additional value in that. If he brings enough value and you can get a second-round pick or first-round pick for him, which I don't think you will, then you might do something like that. But again, he's more valuable to your team right now, sitting on the penalty kill, playing on the best, potentially the second best line or best line on the team with Evans and Armia and Heineman. So, and then the other guy, Dvorak, I just don't think he's going to bring enough to it. And Evans, I read an article today on RDS, I think, or maybe it was Sportsnet, where he was communicating to the media that he wants to stay, and the media also found out Montreal wants him to stay. So I think Montreal are going to try to re-sign Evans and keep him in a 3rd or 4th line spot, and have Beck kind of fit in. Beck or Kapanen will kind of fight for that spot once Dvorak's days are numbered on the Canadiens. I'm not, as you guys know, I'm not the biggest fan of Dvorak, but he's in a UFA situation, and he's not. I mean, he's doing okay this year on that line, but he's not going to bring nothing special for the salary that he brings to the table, right? So that's the challenge.
And we have people like Beck and stuff in the minors,
and Kapanen.
There's a lot of replacements that are potentially there for cheaper, right? So
yep.
And that was just if they lose, right? If they win, you don't expect them to really do much, right? Just kind of roll with the team.
No, that's if they win. So I mean, so I think if they're winning, they're only going to get rid of Savard.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they would only get rid of Savard if they get a second-round pick or better.
Okay.
And otherwise, and I don't even know if they'll do that because I don't know if they'll get a second-round pick or better, and they'll also validate whether if you lose Savard, is the team going to fall off be bad, because they don't want this team to go down. So that's my take on that statement. I'm not the general manager, but from my perspective, I think they should keep going with the team they have. They have enough assets in the minors and in prospects and so forth. They have enough draft picks. I think I heard 22 picks or something like that in the next 2 years. So they have enough assets they can use to make trades and leverage players. They're not going to get, if you get a second round pick from, let's call a team Colorado, it's going to be a 60th pick. It's not that much.
That's where you pick Hutson, though.
Yeah. I mean, that's 1 in a million. Although, do you know that I found out Letang was also a 62nd pick overall back in his day? So I guess some good defensemen have come out of that pick overall. So anything else you want to chat about? I mean, there's a big game on Monday. That's my dog wanting to get into the show. There's a big game on Monday where the Vancouver Canucks are coming into town. You're from Vancouver. I know you follow that team. Well, you're from Vancouver. You go to school in Vancouver, and you follow the team. Any predictions? Any thoughts about the game on Monday?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the Canucks, they're a pretty good team. In general, I think right now, especially with all their injuries, they have. I don't really like their defensive core that much. I think they're pretty bad, and that's why they've been struggling a lot this year. Especially, I think they lost like a couple people. They lost what's his name, the Russian defenseman. I don't know their team now, well, but they I watched them in the playoffs, and I've watched them this year as well. And I know about their players. They have a couple solid players that are pretty good. I think right now a big issue is just like a lot of their star players are underperforming, and I think it could be it depends, especially with their players injured. I could see the Canadiens as kind of this young team that's playing really well to do pretty well in this game, to be honest. especially, because with how we're playing, I think I think it'll be closer to something like the Chicago game, and not in the sense of the score, but more in like the amount of shots compared to like it's kind of the defensive game that we saw in Colorado.
Right.
I don't know what goalie is playing. I know Demko is injured, but their other goalies haven't been great this year. So for me personally, I think the Canadiens probably should win the game. I would probably bet 70-30 on that one. So.
Okay. All right, I'm feeling good about the Montreal Canadiens. It'll be interesting to see if they start Montembeault. I think they will. I think the weekend comes, and I think there's a game on Friday in Washington, and then there's a game at home. I believe it was Dallas. So they might give Dobes his first shot at home on Saturday, but it'll be interesting. There are some fans that are calling for Dobes to start against Vancouver at home and get a bit of a home experience. I wouldn't do that. I don't know if I would do that, only because, I mean, what do you think of that?
I mean, it could be interesting. I feel like it could be kind of like awarding him a game and maybe like lighting a fire under Monty as well. Because I mean, he didn't play bad at all in the Chicago game, but it could be interesting in that sense.
Yep.
I also think maybe because Monty just played, I mean, they both kind of recently just played. It might be interesting to give Monty a fair chance as well, because Dobes had like a really long break, I think, between the last games, right? Whereas
he had a week almost.
Monty didn't have as long as a break, so
yeah. I
think maybe just switching who gets the break, they could do that as well, just to see just to give them both fair shots. And I mean, with that Canucks team, I think it could be an interesting challenge. I do still think they're a pretty good team. I mean, they still have like Garland and who's playing really well, and JT Miller. They have a couple other players that are solid. I'm forgetting names, but they're a great team. Outside of
Myers.
Myers,
you're a big fan of Myers.
I don't like Myers. He's kind of like he's like a tall Matheson.
our man Matheson. I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm going to call it out, but Matheson is one of the most gifted hockey players in terms of skaters and shooters, and he's sometimes very solid defensively too. He makes some good plays, like off, getting the men off the puck. But he frustrates me. He makes a lot of little mistakes and a lot of interesting decisions, I guess.
I think honestly, I mean, I don't know if you agree with me, and I've told you this before, but I think he's playing worse this year. But I think he's a better player than he has been this year. I think he maybe earlier in his career he was kind of this level of inconsistent, but last year I felt like he had more good games, and this year I feel like he's been, I mean, maybe he's more consistent this year where he's had more bad games, and I feel like Matheson is a really important player for our team in the sense that I feel like when he has a good game, they usually win. Like when you can notice Matheson playing really well, specifically defensively and stuff, he's a key player. Obviously, I mean, it makes sense, right? He plays a lot. He's the defenseman who gets the most minutes, so it's logical. But to me, that's kind of the issues that he hasn't played. He hasn't had that many games where he's been very good, and he's had a couple games where he's been awful, and he basically made too many mistakes that cost the team. So I think he still is an important player. And that's why it can be frustrating a little bit. Again, like what you said, he's very skilled and stuff like that. So
I mean, I've said this before, and I'll stop it there. Is Matheson was on the Florida Panthers and he was on the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I have respect for both of those management's teams and their trades, even though they weren't good. Both, Florida traded Matheson to Pittsburgh, and then Pittsburgh traded Matheson to Montreal. They traded him for almost nothing, and they did that probably to get rid of him, to be honest. That's my take. And I think the Montreal Canadiens are going to get to that point where he has value right now, and you might be able to get something for him. Mm-hmm. But if not, right, you're going to get Gooley and Hutson and Jackeye in there, and then hopefully Reinbacher or Mailloux steps up in the next couple of years and can play right defense, and Carrier is there. And they're probably going to make a trade for another right defenseman, I would suggest, or something. And if that happens, then Matheson's days in Montreal are numbered in terms of, years at least. Like, I don't think he'll be in the team in 2 years, and there may not be a better time to trade him than either this trade deadline or over the summer. So we'll see. I mean, and a lot of good general managers have traded him for a lot less than what Montreal is probably going to get for him because of that, because of what he brings. He brings a lot to the table, skill wise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it has been, at least last year, I think was the best year of his career. So I think it's the height of his value in that sense. So,
which is saying something. I'll leave it at that. All right. I don't know if we want to go into all the things we've talked about in the past. Is there any, obviously everyone's been very impressed with Evans. Evans has kind of stepped up. I've been a huge proponent of Evans for 3 or 4 years. He's finally, producing and bringing value to the team over and above what he always brought, which was work ethic and strong 200-foot hockey and winning faceoffs. Now he's actually, taking a fourth line. And I don't remember which media person said it, but at least before this weekend, which I know Heineman got 2 goals. I know one was on a power play, I think. The fourth line had 26 goals as a line, and the next closest fourth line, if you want to call them that, in the NHL had 14 goals. So they were not almost double production of the best fourth line in the NHL from a goals perspective. With Evans with 10, Heineman with 9 or 10 now, and Armia was 6 or 7. So and so all in all, they're doing. That line has just been tremendous. I'll leave it at that. And
and I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. I mean, especially, it is a little unfortunate that we can't get a line like that. I mean, later in the
development,
later in the rebuild, I guess, or when we're actually a competitive team for sure. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, one of the key lines that we had, like when we went to Stanley Cup Finals, was our fourth line, right, with Armia and Corey Perry and Stahl, right? Like that, they played incredibly well. So, having a line like that is really, really cool. I mean, in the sense, is the issue is that we have lines above them that are probably not as good or not as productive. So,
I mean, there's what's the word I'm looking for? There's talk about Montreal re-signing Armia. And maybe not at the salary he's making now, but maybe at $2.5 million or something like that. And they sign him as kind of a fourth line player with Evans, right? So you have Evans and Armia as your fourth line, and then you have the younger guys in that third line spot, and it's going to be a battle. Like it's Newhook, it's Kapanen, it's Beck, it's Waugh, it's Heineman. It's there's a bunch of guys in that fourth line, in that third line battle, because I think the top 2 lines, although Slafkovsky has to step up, the top 2 lines are pretty set, unless Doc falls off and he'll fall to the third line, and then they'll try to find a replacement, and it could be a Hage or it could be somebody with experience, right?
Yeah.
The Canadiens are going to have $20 to $30 million of cap space next year. Not including Line A, I guess, and so they can spend that money wisely, either in a free agency or through a trade or through a restricted free agent offer letter, right? They can find a guy that can maybe fit in for that spot. I think there's 2 glaring weaknesses for the Canadiens, and if Dobes fills the third one, which is goaltending. Because I don't think Fowler's going to be ready at 20 years old to be a backup goalie for Montembeault. I think he looks really good, but I think he's going to have to spend some time in Laval. So I'm glad that Dobes is at least in 2 games looking like he's stepping up. But I think the 2 glaring weaknesses that remain are the Montreal Canadiens need a right-handed defenseman that could play solid defense. They drafted him, Reinbacher, but he's 19 years old and he's been injured his whole the last couple of years. So they need a right-handed defenseman that can play solid defense, and they need a second-line center. And listen, I'm a Kirby Dach fan. I've been hugely disappointed with Kirby Dach for the first couple of months, like everybody else. I haven't heard anyone that was too ecstatic. I'm actually very impressed with his last 5 or 6 games offensively. I know he's putting the puck in the net, but not even putting the puck in the net. He's carrying the puck. He's winning battles in the corners.
Yeah.
He's looking more confident with his stick handling. He's making little moves here and there. He's looking like the kind of player he wants. I am absolutely disappointed in his defensive game. He's having a hard time figuring out this hybrid system. You know, when you're a winger or center, you have to rotate and you have to play different positions. And he seems lost out there at times, and you can't be lost. You have to figure that out. And I think that's going to be. Maybe it's just taking him a little bit longer because the rest of the team was having an issue for 2 months, and now they're better. But maybe it's going to take him a month or 2 more. Maybe finally that his legs. But that's the biggest weakness that concerns me. But if he can figure out the defensive side of the puck and he continues to doing what he's doing offensively, I love a line of Doc, Line A, and Demidov next year. You know what I mean? Like that would be a tremendous. I wouldn't even call it a second line. Or you can rotate Slafkovsky and Demidov, and have a Slafkovsky Line A and Doc line as a second line. So they tried that for a minute, but I think the players are playing better, and it could be interesting to see.
Yeah,
Your thoughts?
I mean, if we have this little delay in Doc where he took a while just because he was injured, with his ACL and stuff.
Yep.
And you see, like, even if he's not at the defensive level yet, if in 2 months he kind of figures it out, right, and we're fighting for a playoff slot and we're making a playoff, and then all the lines are playing well defensively, then they could upset a team potentially if they make it to a wild card or something. Like that's kind of a perfect timing, right? Everything has to. It doesn't have to happen now.
Yep.
But if it develops into happening at that time, at the perfect timing, then I'm not saying they're going to go in like a Stanley Cup run, but they might win some games in playoffs and perhaps even win a series if they play really, really well. So, if they play at the level they have around now, and if they keep it up, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they at least fight for a playoff spot. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, and this team is built with a bit of an identity now, right? You have a first line that knows how to play offensive hockey and works hard. You have a second line that is a little bit big guys mostly. I mean, with Newhook, it's a little bit different, but they're bringing a different kind of angle to the game. And then you have the second and third line, the third and fourth line, just playing with energy. And both of those lines are doing some great things. And I can't say enough good things about Heineman. He definitely looks like he's better at the NHL level than he was at the AHL level, which is kind of hard to believe. But he looks like he's figured it out on his side. He's getting more mature and he's figuring out hockey. So I'm excited for this team for the rest of the year. I'm excited for this week, for the rest of this week. Anything else you want to talk about before we call it an evening?
No, I think we could wrap it up.
All right, so we'll wrap it up. This was Rick Wagen and Cole Wagen with next shift. Suzuki does not suck. Suzuki does not suck. He does not suck at all. So we're looking forward to the game on Monday. Talk to you guys soon. We'll be doing a post-game show after that. Talk to you guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Cole.
Yeah.